This video addresses a different kind of public speaking that all of us have to do at least once in our lives, and that is going through an interview. So an interview is very much an impromptu speech because while you have an idea as to the kinds of questions that might be answered, you don't necessarily know all of the questions or the order in which they're going to be listed or who's actually going to be asking you the questions. So there is an element of limited preparation with regard to interviews. So one can certainly see an interview as being a kind of impromptu speech. And because of that, I think it's probably important to know some interviewing tips for some of the more common questions. Certainly there are a lot of websites out there that will go into excessive and wonderful detail of how to answer every kind of question in every kind of field. But I'm going to talk about three that I think are very common, and everybody should at least have a handle on how to do this. So the first question, or the three tips that I have, let me do my preview here real quick, is the question, what is your greatest strength and your greatest weakness? The second question I'll talk about a little bit is tell me about yourself. That's usually the first question, usually in an interview. And the final one that I'll talk about today is describe an obstacle or a challenge or a difficulty that you faced and what you learned from it. So we're going to take each of these in turn. So with regard to the strength and weakness, I would ask the question, which one do you think you should address first? If you say strengths, you're not entirely incorrect, but I think you are rather incorrect because I think it's always best to do the weaknesses first. And the reason why, and really you want to list just one weakness, not a whole list of weaknesses. The reason why you want to do this is you want to end on a good note. So if, let's say your weakness is that you procrastinate, that's a common weakness that people have. So if you say that I procrastinate a lot, or I have a tendency to procrastinate on a task that I don't particularly want to do, then it's nice to be able to sort of turn that weakness around and end on a positive and say, my strength is, because I know that I procrastinate, either A, you can do a couple different versions of this, either A, I now know how to work under pressure a little bit better and I know how to sort of monitor, when I'm procrastinating and then when I actually have to start going, and I'm also used to it. You could also say something like, because I tend to procrastinate, I also try to establish little goals for myself so that I'm not necessarily procrastinating, or maybe I think about it and I audio tape it on my phone, or do something that you can kind of turn that around. Now that doesn't mean you always have to take your weakness and turn it into a strength, but that's one strategy, and that way you show that you're very much aware of what makes you human, but also this is what I need to do to correct those things. And usually the weakness should link to something about the interview that you're doing. If you're interviewing for a job, then you want to make sure your weakness kind of reflects something that might happen on the job. If you're at a scholarship interview and they ask you what your weakness is, maybe it's something else. So that would be my recommendation, is always do the weakness first. And usually, because any interviewing committee will always ask it as a strength and a weakness. They never ask it. I've never heard anybody ask the weakness and then the strength. So what you need to do then when you answer that question is say, would it be okay if I tackled the weakness first? And then someone will say, of course you can, and then you can go into your weakness. All right, moving into the second question, which is to tell me a little bit about yourself. So let me tell you a little bit about what it's not. First off, it's not a bio. It isn't, my name is so-and-so, and I'm 19 years old, or I'm 20 years old. A couple of things here. You don't need to say your name, first off, because they have it on their list. Now there is some disagreement if you have a name that might be difficult to pronounce, that you should probably pronounce your name. I don't know that's the best time to correct someone if they have mispronounced it. So and that's, and again, different websites will tell you different things, but it just feels like you're saying something that's self-evident because they have it in front of them in some form. Even if they don't know how to say it, they can look at it. But it's not a bio in terms of you never say your age. It's illegal for any interviewing committee to ask, so don't volunteer that. There are other things that you probably shouldn't mention that have nothing to do with a job that you're trying to get, or a scholarship you're trying to get. You don't need to say your marital status. You don't want to say your religion. You want to try to stay away from all of those things because that's not important in the job. So, for someone to say, my name is so-and-so, I'm 18 years old, I'm a college student, that's fine, but that isn't really what this question is about. What they're really trying to find out in this question, and because it's the first question that they will ask you in an interview most likely, what they're really looking for is, are you a good fit for us? So essentially, after this question, the interviewing committee would be able to say either, yes, this person feels like they're going to fit well here, or no, we're not getting good vibes from them, that they may not necessarily fit well for us. So that would be something that you would have to be very mindful of. So just know that that's what this question is. So really what you need to do in this question, because it's not a list of accomplishments, they've got it on a resume already, or they've got it on your application, is really a story of a story of you and how you came to be at this particular interview. So if you're interviewing, for example, for a lifeguard position, then it might be you start with the first time you ever got in the water, or maybe you almost drowned at some point, and you tell that story of being afraid of water, and then your parents wanting to get you to not be afraid, and so you took swim lessons, and then you realized other little kids were scared, and you started teaching, and so from there, then we can see why you're actually here at this interview. Certainly a person who's applying for a teaching position might perhaps start with, that when they were younger, they liked to, they like to kind of quiz their teachers, that on their book reports or their papers or whatever, maybe there was a section where they had like a little multiple choice section that the teacher had to answer, and they made that kind of fun. Or maybe they have a parent that was also a teacher, or another relative that was a teacher. So it's really about those influences in your life that have brought you to this position that you're at now. And that's where they kind of go, okay, you feel like a really good fit here. We like what you're saying. And then when you get to the today of why you're here, then you can talk a little bit about your schooling. You can talk a little bit about work experience. So you can certainly pull some of that in, but it's not simply a list of accomplishments or things of, this is my age, and these are the video games I like to play, and this is what I do in my spare time, and I've got 3 cats, and blah blah blah, because that's not really what they're looking for. Finally, we have the last question here, which is to describe an obstacle or a challenge. And this question really is looking for specific parts. And it usually is describe an obstacle, a challenge, or a difficulty, and what you've learned from it is really kind of the way the question is asked. So there's really a 4-part method that I think works really well in this, because you want to give this one enough time, because this is where they test and where they find out about your character, your ability to solve problems, your ability to move forward. And so all of those are really important traits in most interviewing situations. So the first part might be to describe an obstacle. Let's say you were bullied at school, or you were bullied at work. That would be the first thing, about talking about that coworker, or talking about that classmate who did this, that, and the other to you. And then the next part is, and this is what makes you human, is to talk about the tangible effect that action had on you. Some students have identified that the obstacle or challenge they faced was COVID, and going from high school into lockdown and missing their senior year, missing their junior and senior year, and having to somehow find some happiness and joy with all that loss. So that would be a clear obstacle for them, or clear challenge for them. And then the tangible effect that it has in terms of feeling like you're disconnected, feeling like you've lost a little chunk of your life that was really important, and so all of that would be that tangible effect. How did this make you feel? What were you thinking at the time? Did you feel like life was just terrible? And then we move on to the third part, which is, what did you do to resolve this? And this can be any number of things. If you were bullied at work, for example, it might be that you say, I finally talked to my manager, or I finally talked to the HR person and the representative, or I talked to a coworker who gave me some feedback because they had experience too, or I filed a report. So what did you do to resolve this? Who did you talk to? What steps did you take? Did you follow through with it? And if you didn't follow through with it, then that's fine too. You simply say, I quit my job, for example, or I was harassed in a class, and so my parents moved me to another school. That would be acceptable too. So it's whatever you did that got you out of that particular situation. It doesn't have to be necessarily a good solution. It just needs to be whatever you actually did. And then here comes the lovely part, is talking a little bit about, what did you learn from this? What's the long-term what was the long-term lesson here? Maybe it's how to stand up for yourself. Maybe it's to think, does this really matter enough to me? And can I, change my job and move on and, not worry about it? So that's the really important part, and that's the thing that you tie up at the end. And so that gives them a very good idea as to how you face adversity, how you process it, what problem-solving skills and critical thinking skills do you have, and then how do you actually implement that type of solution. So now you have a little bit more of an idea as to how all of these things go. And so good luck on your next interview.